everybody, it's Angelo with Angelo's Workbench, back in video number 6 in the beginner how-to video series using a Revell 1970 Dodge Charger. I am assembling the kit using nothing but the basics, enamel paints and some acrylic brush paints, as well as rattle cans. So you won't see any airbrush, you won't see any fancy stuff. We're kind of keeping it back to the basics here for the beginners that got a kit for Christmas, got a kit kicking around that they want to build, and we're going through it step by step. What I'm doing right now is I'm applying the decals to the gauges for the dash. This kit has a really cool thing. There's a piece of clear plastic, and you apply the gauges onto that, and then they push through a couple little tiny holes in the dashboard, so it kind of adds a little bit more realism to it. They also include in this kit the wood grain for the dash as well, which I am applying to the dash similarly to how I applied it to the center console in the last video, video number 5. Putting a little microsol setting solution onto the dashboard, and then applying the decal. I'm choosing the slide technique here because this decal is a little bit long. I wouldn't want to peel that off of the backing with the tweezers because it might fold over on itself, and then I would have a real hard time applying it to the dash. So what I'm doing is, just as I just did right there, I put a part of it onto the dash, worked a piece of it off of the paper, then pushed onto it with the toothpick, pulled the paper out, and it just slides right onto the dash, as you see there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little dry brushing on the door panels. I did this same technique in video number 5 on the center console for the metal trim that is on there. I basically get just a very small amount of silver paint on the brush. I take most of it off on the paper towel, and then I am rubbing the brush over the high points on the plastic so that it will highlight them in the metal color. It's done very carefully and very slowly. You don't want to have a lot of paint on the brush. In fact, you want to take almost all of the paint off of the brush. And be sure to clean the brush when you're done so that you can use it over and over again. It will ruin your brush. Your brush will be good for nothing else but dry brushing. But again, this is the same technique I used in video number 5, so we will move along. The way this interior is designed in this car is, instead of it being a one-piece pan, it is several pieces. So you have the bottom part, and then you have the sides, which hold the door panels, the parts that I'm getting ready to glue right now, and then you have the dashboard, which goes in. So essentially you're dealing with 3 or 4 pieces, whereas sometimes you just have that one-piece pan and then you glue in the dashboard and that's it. This gives you the ability to detail those door panels a little bit more, and as we just did, we just dry brushed parts of it. Now I'm going to glue them in. I'm gluing around the edges and setting them into place. Getting them lined up properly is key, or else the dashboard isn't going to be in the right place. So I'm going to line up this other door panel, then I'm going to install the dash, and that's going to wrap up the interior. I'll have a nice little still shot coming up in a few seconds, and you can check that out. So there's the still shot of the interior. It's looking pretty good so far. Right now I'm just gluing the heater box, onto the firewall and preparing the firewall. They have some details that have to get mounted onto there. The pedals for the interior is one thing. And then I'm going to glue the firewall onto the front of the floor pan. And basically that would be done and ready for installation into the body. Except for some detail painting that we're going to do in the next clip. So right here, I'm just going to get a little silver paint and highlight a few things on the firewall that look like they could be highlighted. I don't know if they're actually supposed to be silver or not. I'm just adding a little bit of detail to make it look interesting, add some visual interest. Having a contrasting color, especially silver on blue, which goes nice together, adds a little bit of visual interest. And they look like they could be silver parts. Who knows? So right here, I'm going to glue in the rear view mirror. Sometimes I like to apply glue with a little toothpick. So I'm using a little bit of the Crazy Glue, the Super Gold Plus, put it on with a toothpick, and then stick the side view mirror in there, and it sticks very quickly. Right now I'm going to start the trim on the body. I'm going to do this by masking off the trim, and then brush painting it silver. I would ordinarily use an airbrush, but the nature of this build is We're not using airbrushes. So I'm going to brush paint it, and I'm going to show you how to get it to come out good. So first thing I'm doing is using frog tape, the yellow frog tape, and I've cut it into thin strips using my X-Acto and my X-Acto ruler, the metal ruler there. And getting a metal ruler is actually a big benefit. Then your razor blade doesn't catch on the wood. That's something I've discovered. And then I'm going to take a little toothpick, and I'm going to burnish the edges. And this is sped up, so my hand is moving really, really fast. In real life, it was a lot slower. So now I'm going to brush paint the silver on. Now, if you're going to brush paint, you have to be very careful. Because if you remember when we learned how to do washes, I said the capillary action sucks the paint into the groove, and that's it. Well, there's going to be capillary action between the tape and the body if you're not careful. So you want to put the paint on very lightly. Even if you have to do 2 or 3 coats, that's fine. Apply the paint very lightly, and then you won't get paint seeping under the tape. If paint seeps under the tape, we've used lacquer clear and lacquer color, and I am detailing the window trim with an acrylic paint. Well, guess what? Acrylic paint doesn't really stick to lacquer all that well. If you get it in a spot that you don't want it, you can very easily remove it with a toothpick. You just be very careful, don't apply a lot of pressure, get a little bit of water in that area and rub the toothpick on it, and you'll take the excess paint off. But if you put it on lightly, the paint, you shouldn't have a problem. And now we're going to start with our chassis assembly. I'm going to assemble the power steering pump first. There's a power steering pump included in the kit, which is kind of nice. Not all kits come with that. And we're going to put the engine into the chassis, which is as simple as there's a small little place on the transmission that mounts up with a spot on the chassis. And then there are 2 little engine mounts that mount onto little parts on the engine block, and it's as simple as that. It just kind of drops in. If you're letting it set cure, be sure not to put it on a flat surface because it will push the engine off of the mount. If you'll notice, I'm going to stick it on a roll of masking tape. And at this point, we are going to put the interior, the previously completed interior, onto the chassis. First, I'm assembling the brake master cylinder and some other little parts to the firewall, which is great, adds visual interest, makes the firewall look nice. Then I'm adding some glue to the mounting points on the chassis, place the interior in place, gravity does the rest, and that's it for adding the interior to the chassis. So next we're going to apply the glass to the body. Now this kit comes with individual windows, which is nice. I would suggest that if your kit comes with one of those ones where the front window and the back window are attached via a clear piece in between and you're supposed to glue that clear piece to the hood, I would suggest separating them and gluing them in individually. It's easier to work with the windows one at a time, and then it also takes out of the equation the fact that a lot of times the clear glass might have been molded and cured just a little bit differently than the body. So you end up with, if you're using one of the one-piece windshields where the front and the back is attached, you end up with sometimes a space and it won't glue in right, or it ends up dropping down a little from the body and you end up with this very visible seam at the top that doesn't look very good. So the individual windows are the best. Work with them one at a time. Be very careful what type of glue that you use. You cannot just use regular model glue. It will fog the glass. You cannot use regular crazy glue. It will fog the glass. I'm using a Bob Smith Industries Super Gold Plus crazy glue, which is a special crazy glue for clear parts. Or you could use the Testors Model Maker Window Cement, which is a white glue. Or you could use Elmer's glue, which is white and dries clear. You want to use the glue in very, very small parts. Put the glue on very lightly, and don't put it all around the whole seam around the window. The window doesn't need that. Just put it in a couple of spots, maybe the corners, maybe one little spot in the middle. Just a couple little dabs of glue will do. You'll see I'm applying it with a toothpick off of a piece of masking tape because I took the glue out of the glue container, put it on the masking tape so that I wouldn't have a lot of glue. You need to make sure that you don't use a lot of glue. You need to make sure that your hands are clean. Sometimes if I'm dealing with very sensitive pieces, I even wear these white cotton gloves. You can't have any paint or glue on your hands. You will leave that immortalized fingerprint in the middle of your windshield if you don't. So be very careful. very light on the glue. Set them into place very carefully. If you can hold them from both sides as you're putting them in, that helps. Make sure that the windshield or the window lands in the correct place. Follow these steps and you'll get a great result on your windows. Now it's time to mate the body to the chassis, and whether or not this is hard or easy depends directly on a couple of things. The first being how well the kit is manufactured. The second being how well you have assembled it thus far. If there's anything out of place, more often than not it has to do with the engine being mounted in the wrong place, or it could be a piece of suspension if that has been applied already. If anything is in the wrong place, it's not going to go together right. This kit went together very easily. I almost couldn't believe it. I thought that it would be a little bit more difficult because the old school muscle cars usually are. So you have to kind of open up the body a little, set the chassis in. You have to make sure that nothing is hitting. You have to look at like 19 different places at the same time. The front of the firewall, the back of the firewall. Make sure that the motor isn't getting damaged on any pieces of the engine bay. Make sure any of the chassis isn't getting damaged anywhere on any of the undercarriage pieces. And then it should just go together. If you're lucky, you won't need to use any glue. It will just hold itself together. Sometimes you might need to use glue. Again, it comes down to the quality of the manufacturing of the kit. If the kit's a really good kit, this is a really good kit. It'll go together easy. You won't need to use the glue, but you might have to fight it if the kit isn't manufactured, isn't engineered well, and those kits are out there. Take your time and you'll get a great result. Now I am assembling what some people call the slam panel, the radiator panel. It's the very front panel at the front of the engine bay where the radiator mounts. And I'm first attaching a couple of horns to the firewall. Then I'm going to glue in the radiator shroud, and this kit actually includes a small little piece for where the latch would normally be to latch the hood. You can see it by my left hand there on the cutting mat. And that's a nice touch. Not all kits include that. It's a nice little bit of added detail when you open the hood and look at the engine. You can see that little piece. And once this is completed, we will set it aside, let it cure. It doesn't get assembled until a later step. Now it is time for a little chassis detailing. There's a couple little things that could be highlighted on the underside, the first of which is the gas tank. So I'm going to detail the gas tank with a Testor's flat steel. I'm using the flat steel because it's easy to brush, and when you're brushing you want to make sure that you don't use too much paint on the areas that are the edges, but you want to use a larger amount of paint in the areas that are the flat points. That'll help you cut down on your brush strokes. If you could put the paint on a little wet on the large flat surfaces, when it cures it will kind of level out and you won't see your brush strokes. Be careful around the edges and your gas tank will look great. That's going to wrap up video number 6 in the beginner how-to video series. Hope you'll come on back and join me for video number 7, where we will continue with our assembly. On the upper left-hand corner, there's a subscribe button. Go ahead and feel free to click that if you're not a subscriber already. Also, feel free to like and comment on the videos, as well as check out some of my other videos that are shown here.